Wait just a moment. What if I told you there's an African leader whose words could reshape how you see history, identity, and the future of our people? This is not politics, it's family. A voice from Africa speaking directly to Black America. A message 400 years in the making. If you believe in truth, unity, and power, stay with me until the very end, because this story will awaken something inside you. And before we begin, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because messages like this don't spread by themselves. Our family carries them forward. In the heart of West Africa, the story of Burkina Faso has long been intertwined with resilience, courage, and vision. Among its leaders stands Ibrahim Traoré, a 35-year-old president whose influence extends far beyond the borders of his country. But this story is not about political maneuvering or conventional diplomacy. It is about something far deeper, a movement that bridges centuries and oceans. For over 400 years, African people were separated from their kin across the Atlantic. Black Americans were taken forcibly from their homes, stripped of their identities, and made to build a new world with their blood, sweat, and brilliance. Yet for all the distance and the suffering, one truth endured: they were never forgotten. They were never abandoned, and now a reconnection was beginning, one that had the potential to change everything. 2 years ago, in the quiet hours of the night, Traoré found himself awake in Ouagadougou, wrestling with the immense pressures of leadership, fighting terrorism, resisting neo-colonial influence, and navigating the challenges of a nation yearning for sovereignty. Unable to sleep, he turned to his computer, watching the unfolding protests in America. He saw the anguish over George Floyd, the outrage at Breonna Taylor's death, and the relentless determination of young Black Americans demanding justice and dignity. It struck him like a bolt of lightning. He saw a reflection of his own people, the soldiers who fought for Burkina Faso's independence, the young revolutionaries who refused to accept poverty as permanent. The same fire burning in Minneapolis and Detroit burned in Ouagadougou, igniting a vision of connection and unity that transcended continents. That night, he called his grandmother, the 89-year-old custodian of their family's oral history. He asked her a question that had never crossed his mind before. After centuries of separation, had the African diaspora ever stopped being family? Her response was profound. For 400 years, she explained, African mothers had looked to the stars, wondering if their children were seeing the same sky. Every harvest, they set aside food for kin who might never return, and every celebration included songs for voices silenced but never forgotten. "We never stopped waiting for you to remember who you are," she said. It became clear to Traoré that this separation was not natural. It had been engineered and enforced by those who understood that unity among Africans would challenge their power. Inspired, he resolved to act. 6 months later, a letter arrived that would change everything. Dr. Aisha Williams, a professor of African Studies at Howard University, wrote from Washington, D.C., detailing the results of years of genealogical research. She had traced her ancestry back to the Mossi Kingdom in Burkina Faso, identifying the village her forebears had left centuries earlier, and even uncovering the names of long-forgotten great-great-grandparents. Yet her letter carried a heavy weight of sorrow. She described the difficulty of reconciling her American identity with her African roots, the uncertainty of belonging, and the alienation of discovering a home she had never known she could return to. Traoré read her words 17 times, feeling a deep, unshakable shame that anyone so brilliant and connected could feel like a stranger in her own ancestral land. That night, he made a decision that would redefine the relationship between Africa and its diaspora. He called Howard University and spoke with Dr. Williams directly, telling her that she was not a stranger, but a daughter returning home. Their conversation lasted 3 hours, covering the struggles of Black Americans in predominantly white institutions and the revelation of finding one's African roots. Traoré promised her that she would not be the last to feel disconnected, and that bridges would be built for every member of the scattered family who wished to return. What followed was the quiet inception of a project called The Reunion, operating outside official government channels. Traoré began reaching out to accomplished African Americans in every field: technology, medicine, education, business, activism, and the arts. His intent was not political, but familial: to reconnect relatives fractured by historical trauma. The first to respond was Marcus Johnson, a software engineer from Oakland. Surprised that an African president would contact him directly, Marcus learned that his own ancestry traced back to West Africa. During a 2-week visit to Burkina Faso, he met local innovators building technology solutions with limited resources but immense creativity. He expected to assist them, but instead he found peers who challenged his thinking. By the end of the visit, Marcus was no longer a visitor. He had become a partner, co-founding a fintech company to serve African communities and the global diaspora. The deeper transformation, he said, was one of belonging, being part of a professional network where he felt, for the first time, truly normal. Soon after, Dr. Michael Thompson, a cardiovascular surgeon from Chicago, joined the effort. He envisioned African-built medical schools and hospitals rooted in cultural competence. Dr. Kesha Williams, a renewable energy engineer, and Robert Jackson, a financial analyst, connected their expertise to African development in ways previously unimaginable. Angela Davis Brown, an education specialist, proposed creating educational models in Africa that could inspire new systems for Black communities worldwide. The culmination of these efforts was a private virtual summit, initially planned for 2 hours but lasting 8. 50 of the most accomplished African Americans, Traoré, had reached out to gather to hear his vision. An Africa that processed its own resources, manufactured its own goods, developed its own technology, and partnered with diaspora experts not for charity, but for collaboration. The response was immediate. Commitments totaling $75 million were pledged across 7 African countries, spanning tech, medicine, renewable energy, finance, and education. Beyond the money, a connection had been forged between African leadership and diaspora expertise, a direct, unprecedented bridge. Of course, not everyone welcomed this transformation. Pressure came swiftly. The French ambassador requested meetings, the World Bank delayed loans, and American media questioned the initiative. Several diaspora partners faced scrutiny at home, highlighting the threat their success posed to entrenched systems. One anonymous call, warning Traoré to reconsider his actions, underscored the stakes. Yet he and his allies had crossed the point of no return. Fear never motivated him. Justice did, and the justice of reuniting a scattered family outweighed any danger. Despite these challenges, the partnerships flourished. Marcus Johnson's fintech project reached tens of thousands of users across multiple countries in months. Dr. Thompson's medical initiative attracted hundreds of African-American healthcare professionals. Renewable energy projects illuminated rural communities previously without reliable electricity. Young African Americans visiting Burkina Faso no longer felt like outsiders. They were returning siblings, welcomed and embraced. One visitor, Ka Robinson from Atlanta, described the transformative experience. For the first time in her life, she felt normal. Her success was not questioned, her presence not doubted. She felt at home. This, Traoré realized, was the true achievement, not merely investment or collaboration, but healing and wholeness. The impact rippled globally. Leaders in Brazil, the Caribbean, and Europe reached out to explore similar partnerships. Within the United States, African American organizations and historically Black universities expressed interest in systematic collaboration, understanding the potential for long-term community benefit. What began as a personal initiative between one African president and a few diaspora individuals had grown into a movement capable of reshaping the relationship between Africa and its global descendants. In Traoré's vision of the future, African American students study in Lagos, Accra, and Nairobi as continental Africans reclaiming their heritage. African students study at Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman as diaspora Africans reconnecting with their history. Professionals, retirees, and entrepreneurs move freely between continents, building businesses, knowledge, and culture, strengthening the Atlantic Bridge. Young people grow up knowing that the oceans scattered their people, but it never severed the connection. Slavery disrupted their story, but it never erased it. At the core of this movement lies a profound truth. Africa is not just a place to visit or a cause to support. It is home, a source of identity, strength, and possibility. Ibrahim Traoré's leadership demonstrates that healing centuries-old wounds is possible, that excellence can exist without apology, and that when separated people reunite with purpose, they become unstoppable. The question now is not whether this vision can succeed, but whether those it calls to action will choose to step through the door and take their place at the table. What emerges from this story is a truth that has endured across centuries, that Africans and their descendants in the diaspora are one people. They are a people who have survived everything the world has thrown at them and are now poised to accomplish what the world once declared impossible. The journey that Ibrahim Traoré has undertaken is not merely political, it is deeply personal. When he first assumed the presidency of Burkina Faso, he believed his mission was to free his country from neo-colonial influence, fight terrorism, strengthen the economy, and restore sovereignty. Those goals remain vital, but he has come to see that they form only part of a much larger purpose. His true mission, as he now understands, is to heal a wound that has spanned 4 centuries. His mission is to prove that families separated by oceans and history can still recognize each other. His mission is to demonstrate that when a dispersed people unite around a shared vision, they become unstoppable. Every interaction with African Americans has been a revelation for Traoré. Each conversation teaches him something new about resilience, ingenuity, and the extraordinary ability to maintain dignity under impossible circumstances. Each partnership illuminates the immense potential of African excellence, unshackled from colonial constraints. And above all, these connections have reminded him of a truth that had faded with time. Burkina Faso and Africa as a whole are not small, powerless nations struggling in isolation. They are part of a global community of Africans, endowed with skills, networks, resources, and power. When combined, these assets can alter the course of human history. This realization brings us to a defining moment. The bridge between continental Africa and African Americans has been tested, proven, and strengthened. The bond between these communities is no longer theoretical. It is powerful, tangible, and transformative. African Americans no longer need to choose between their American identity and their African roots. Similarly, continental Africans do not need to choose between authentic local development and global engagement. The work accomplished in just 2 years demonstrates that the future once deemed impossible is not only achievable, it is inevitable. Yet even inevitability requires choice. Courage is still demanded. Commitment is still essential. The door between Africa and African American communities has been opened wider than it has been in 4 centuries. The question now is whether those it calls to action will walk through it. The challenge is direct. African Americans have spent centuries proving that they could excel in systems not designed to support them. They have surmounted barriers that would have crushed others, achieving greatness in every conceivable field. They have proven themselves beyond any reasonable doubt. Now, the question shifts from proving to building. What will they construct with the knowledge, skill, and influence they have amassed? Traoré's message is an invitation to take their place as founders and creators. Africa is not asking them to abandon America. They are not being asked to choose one identity over another. Rather, they are being called to embrace Africa as an extension of themselves, a source of strength, a part of the story that complements the one they have written in the United States. They are invited to become bridges, facilitators, and translators, connecting communities across the Atlantic and enabling each to learn from and empower the other. The choice is clear: remain a spectator in Africa's growth, or become an active participant in its transformation. Continue to succeed within systems created by others, or co-create new systems grounded in African values, designed to serve African people. The promise is equally clear. Those who answer the call will be welcomed not as saviors, but as family returning home. Their expertise, experience, and identity will be respected, their skills amplified, and their networks fully engaged. The work being undertaken is not symbolic. It is tangible. Businesses, institutions, and systems are being built to endure for generations, and those who join will never walk alone. African hands will reach back to meet every step taken toward home. The final invitation is profound. Black Americans were stolen, scattered, and forced to build the dreams of others, yet their own dreams never died. After 400 years, the opportunity to come home has arrived, not to a relic of the past, but to a workshop of the future. An Africa of innovation, enterprise, and unstoppable youth awaits. An Africa imagined by ancestors and longed for by grandparents now stands ready for their return. Those watching are not visitors, guests, or outsiders. They are returning family members, and their place at the table has been reserved for 4 centuries. The only action required is to take the seat that has always been theirs. And so the call extends to all who hear this story. If it resonates, if it awakens something long dormant, share it. Share it with every member of the scattered family. This is not a conversation about individuals or platforms. It is a reunion of people long divided by history. And the success of that reunion depends on all of us participating, choosing to step through the door, and claiming the future that has always been ours.